What? Why? Why? Oh my god, it's moving. It's moving. Oh my god. The year is 2016. Ivan G, who at the time was only 13 years old, releases Jolly. The game, which was loosely based on the Filipino restaurant chain Jollibee's, was one of the most well-known games within the Five Nights at Freddy's community, mostly for being broken as hell, but what's actually going on in the game? If you somehow don't know, in the year of our good Lord and Savior 2025, do not fret, for I'm here to... I'm here to explain everything in the entire series in this video, right here, right now, right now. Please don't hurt me. On the 17th of July 2016, the first installment of the series was released on GameJolt. The premise of the game itself was simple. Robots that walk around for some reason, they want to kill you, limited power, all the stuff you'd expect to see in a Five Nights game. That being said, for the time, this was a unique game. Looking at the office, you have a window and its respective light switch, the door and its light switch, a maintenance panel that tells you the time, building power and the power you can draw from the generator, and the camera panel. On said cameras, you have two floors, the vents, the elevators, and this thing, which we'll get back to in a moment. While the camera map might seem overwhelming, the only cameras you have to worry about are 11 and sometimes 14. Now, we've talked about the cameras, let's talk about who you're going to see on them. You have Jolly and his classic counterpart, Tweety the Bird, George and Maxie, and the Metalionette. While these characters are all going to end up in the same spot, save for two of them, they have different methods of getting there. By that, I mean they only have two. There's not a lot of diversity in this game. Tweety and Jolly start on their shared stage on the second floor, and they go to the elevator on camera 14. After they get into the elevator, you have the option to slow them down by calling it back up to floor 2, but they're eventually going to end up at your window one way or the other. The other two, George and Maxie, start on their respective stages on cameras 9 and 10. They then crawl into the connected vents, which can be sealed, much like the ones in Five Nights 3, but doing so takes up a bar of usage, which will in turn drain more power. Both of these characters will also end up at the window in front of your office. Metalionette, the outlier of the group, likes to hang out in camera 11, where she's being restrained by wires. Occasionally, and by that I mean every 3 goddamn seconds, the game will start screeching at you, indicating that you have to flip to her camera and repair one or more of the wires. Finally, we have Classic Jolly. He's this game's Golden Freddy. If he appears, flip up the camera, or else... I'm gonna give you a chance to skip ahead a couple seconds. Extreme flashing lights warning. Now, I've talked enough about the mechanics. This game does have lore. I'm not too sure what the hell is going on, but here's a quick rundown. You play as Michael Schmidt, no correlation to Mike Schmidt, watching over Jolly's Fantasy World, a competitor to shit. You play as Michael Schmidt, watching over Jolly's Fantasy World. Damn it. You play as Michael Schmidt, watching over Jolly's Fantasy World, a competitor to the recently opened Circus Baby's Pizza World for the week. The robots walk around, management acts like it's normal, and you get $300 for not dying. The paycheck is dated 2017. I don't know what relevance that has, but I feel like it has some. You get an additional $60 if you don't die on night 6, and you get laid off after night 7 because some maniac broke in and dismantled all the robots. There's also these FNAF 3 type minigames after each night, which according to the wiki implies that whoever the hell this guy is put fucking cyanide in the food and killed all the kids. But overall, for a game made by a middle schooler, it's a great game. I don't have anything else to write for my closing thoughts, so we're just gonna move on. The second installment to the series, which was aptly named Jelly 2, was released only 3 months after the first. The game took everything from the first game, the lore, the gameplay, the characters, set it on fire, put it in the blender, and threw it out the window. These two games have nothing in common besides 2 characters. Putting that aside, the game was okay. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Unlike the first game, this one takes place on a cargo ship, which, credit where it's due, is something I haven't seen done before. Your office is this tiny ass room with a TV in it. Rather than doors, you have these 2 orange buttons that'll shock whatever's standing outside and charge for a solid 30 seconds. Looking behind you, there's these pipes. What do they do, I hear you ask? Why, they leak fucking gas, of course. Every so often there'll be a gas leak, which disables a controlled shock in the cameras. You have to fix it if you want to use them. Apparently this doesn't affect your physical health at all. Looking at the cameras, you have a map that, in comparison to the original, is tiny. This map has only 9 cameras, which is great because it's easier to keep track of everyone, but also not so great because there's less space between them and you. Like I mentioned earlier, you can use a shock in the cameras, which will stun whoever is on that camera. Both shocking a camera or a character moving will shut down the cameras temporarily, which is absolutely catastrophic to the gameplay loop, but I digress. Now we've talked about the cameras, let's talk about who you're going to see on them. What? I've already said that? Okay. Oh my god, I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Okay, I get it. You have 6 characters to fend off, all of them functionally identical. Jolly and George will start in camera 1, Freddy and Bonnie and Chica will be in camera 2, and if Jolly leaves camera 1 or Freddy leaves camera 2, their respective cameras will shut off completely, even if there are other characters present. All the characters will travel through the hallways, save for George, who takes an unnecessary detour through the vents. Jolly, Freddy, and Bonnie will approach from the right door, and George and Chica will come at you from the left. When a character disappears from the cameras, that means they're at your door, which you can't see them from, and you have to shock them. Unlike the ones in the cameras, these doors don't need you to fix any existing gas leaks, nor does it shut down any cameras, but like I said earlier, it takes about 30 seconds to recharge, and that's your only method of defense. Much like the first game, this one has lore. Unlike the first, however, this game is canon to the timeline, so do what you can with that. The post-night minigames are also present in this game, but they're all totally identical, so we're not going to dwell on them. All you need to know is that 5 kids died. In relation to the canon timeline, this game comes first, taking place in 1985, just after the shutdown of Freddy's. What are these two doing here, I hear you ask? I don't know, but we're getting off track. After each night, you get a fun with plush trap style minigame. Would you get out of here? Anyways, this section is functionally similar to the gameplay of Five Nights 4, but there's only one incredibly, unnecessarily aggressive animatronic, being Foxy. You have to sit on the bed, which causes your sleep meter to go up, but you also need to get out of bed and check the doors, which decreases your sleep assurance. If you can somehow make it through without dying, you'll receive a 2-hour head start on the next night. Jolly 3 Chapter 1 was released only 11 months after the second game, and this is where the games actually start getting good. While the first games felt like they were held together with paper clips and duct tape, this game, said by Markiplier himself, is something you could convince him that Scott made. So let's talk about it. After you click New Game, you're greeted with a cutscene of the facility before being thrown into it. This is your office. You have 2 windows, a lever, and the cameras. The windows have a light which shows you either character outside of them, but outside of that, they're kind of pointless. This lever is your defense. It releases gas whenever it's pulled, which blinds whatever stumbles into your room. It also likes to break. As for the cameras, we're right back to big and confusing maps where they know where you are, but you don't know where they are. Additionally, all 13 cameras have fans in them which pump oxygen into the facility. However, as you might have guessed, these also like to break. The thing is, though, if one of them breaks, all of them break. Once the game starts screaming at you, you have to flip through all 13 cameras and find the one that lets you fix the fan. If you don't do so in time, you die. In the top right corner, there's a maintenance tab which shows you a map of the fans, the amount of gas you have, the condition of the gas dispenser, and the time. There's 2 buttons which will both refill the gas dispenser and repair it should it break. The map of the fans only serves as a cosmetic because the second a fan breaks, the whole thing starts tweaking out. Besides all that, the gameplay is pretty simple. Watch the robots survive until 6 AM. That is, until you reach 6 AM. Every night includes an extra segment you have to survive, like having to ward off Tweety while getting into a safe, or being tied to a conveyor belt going into some ungodly crushing machine. Moving on to the characters, this game has the same cast as the first, as well as some returning faces from the second. You have Tweety, Jolly, George, Maxie, and the Metallionette, who is now named the Antoinette, as well as Metal Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. Tweety and Maxie will start at the windows next to you and head to your office. Jolly and George function the same, but they start on the opposite side of the building in camera 13. Should a character get into your office, you have to pull the gas lever, otherwise you die. The metal characters, though, function similarly to the Phantoms from FNAF 3. Metal Freddy has a chance to appear in your office when you pull the cameras down, Bonnie might appear in the windows if you turn the lights on, Chica appears in the cameras, and Foxy, the only one who can kill you, will jump scare you if you don't fix the fans in time. The Antoinette isn't present during the night segments, but rather works as a plot device to drive the story forward in the post-night sections. Speaking of the story, this is the first game with a coherent plot. In relation to the timeline, this one comes second, taking place in 2017. You play as Jack Carson, Fazbear's Fright employee and totally irrelevant outside of this game, guided by Theodore Murphy, his best friend, also completely irrelevant outside of the third game. The story is simple enough. You're here to gather artifacts for Fazbear's Fright, but you turn up empty-handed. However, I did forget to mention there are post-night minigames which give you a look at the backstory. Eric, the character you play as in the second game, is hired as an employee for Freddy's, but his daughter, Zoe, ended up being one of William's victims. After hearing that the animatronics might be haunted, he takes up a job on a cargo ship under the alias Liam, but he finds nothing. He comes home to his wife, who immediately divorces him, and she goes to his place of work to trash everything. Unfortunately for her, this ended up being a horrible idea because she was electrocuted to death trying to dismantle the Antoinette, and went on to possess it. As for Eric, he got the William Afton treatment, and now possesses the Jolly animatronic. This covers a majority of the story for Chapter 2, so we aren't going to revisit it there. This game takes place immediately after the first chapter, but came out just under a year after. Since chronologically there isn't much else to be said, we aren't going to talk about the lore for very long. That said, let's get into it. After you turn up empty-handed gathering artifacts from the facility, your boss, unnamed no-nonsense businessman, sends you back to the super-secret underground facility to retrieve literally anything. After stumbling around in the dark trying to figure out which way is which, you end up at this door. After you're denied, you go to shamble around the pitch-black building for a few more minutes until... Yeah, I know, hurts my eyes too. This is your office, a tiny, cramped box compared to what you had in Chapter 1. To your left and right are your always open doors from which the scaries approach, and behind you is a maintenance panel, and of course you have your cameras. In true Jolly fashion, there's 14 characters... There's 14 cameras for you to lose the characters in, but it's further complicated by the sections it's split into. If you click a fourth of the map, you can access the cameras in that fourth, but if you want to look at any other cameras, you have to click out of that fourth and onto a different one. Looking at your maintenance panel, you got some useful tools at your disposal. Most notably, you have the signal jammer, which is your main defense. If either animatronic is at your doorway, you gotta use it to send them off. If you use it otherwise, it'll charge for fucking ever. In the second tab, you have a radar for when the cameras get too complicated, but it also takes a really long time to recharge. In your third tab is the maintenance, where you can fix the air conditioning, ventilation, or cameras should they shut off. Now for the characters, all of the cast from Chapter 1 are still here with some minor changes. Jolly is missing his head, Maxie and Tweety are shadow animatronics, and George, he's just fine the way he is. There's also Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy now, all with the Rusty prefix, but we'll get back to them in a minute. The Antoinette isn't present in the main game, but she's still important lore-wise, so just don't forget she exists. Jolly and George are your only hostile animatronics for the main part of the game. They function similarly, traveling through their respective sides of the building to the corresponding door. The main difference between the two, though, is that when George is at your door, his eyes glow and Jolly's don't. The other two, Tweety and Maxie, are your phantoms. Tweety will slowly materialize in the office the longer you're on the cameras, and Maxie appears on said cameras. Similarly to its predecessors, this game has post-night segments after your main shift. Contrarily to this first game, though, they're all the same. You're in your house decrypting files on your computer, but as you'd expect, you're not alone. Looking behind you, there's two doors and a window. Should one of these open, you have to run up to them and listen for breathing. If there is breathing, you shine your light, and if not, you close the door. All the characters function the same, but for what it's worth, Bonnie and Chica attack from the leftmost hallway, Freddy the center door, and Foxy the window. After you've decrypted each file, you get an audio file that gives you a little bit of lore behind the facility. On night 5, the game throws a bit of a curveball, putting the player to a free roam segment after 6 AM, but the halls are now inhabited by your aggressors. After running into walls for a few minutes, you end up in the oxygen room. This section is similar to the breaker room from Sister Location, requiring you to repair all the oxygen systems while defending yourself from the animatronics, albeit with a comically small power supply. After you go into the room you try to get into at the start of the game, you're brought to the bad ending, where you find Springtrap, but the building just so happens to collapse on you. But if you can pull off some insane wizardry, or just look at the wiki, you can get the good ending through the phone application on the main menu, which follows a reunion of Eric's family having all been set free. Like I said earlier, there's not much to be said in terms of lore since we covered all of it in Chapter 1, so we just aren't going to talk about it. Now, if you've been paying any attention to the community lately, you'd know that this game has been put on an indefinite hiatus for the time being and likely isn't going to come back. We aren't going to talk about the drama, but I am going to include a link to the doc in the description if you want to see for yourself. A demo for what the game would have been has been released though, so we'll take what we can get from it. Looking at your office, it's far more elaborate than the ones from previous games. In Post-Shift 2 style, you have a full 360 view of the room around you. Looking in front of you, you have your cameras, to your left and right are your doors, and behind you is the elevator. From any view, so long as you're still at the desk, you can hide underneath it. You're also provided a flashlight, which, I mean, it's a flashlight, what else can I say? There's quite a lot happening in the cameras. You have 2 floors, the vents, as well as a grid that shows the temperature of the building. There's 19 cameras, plus another 6 in the vent system. The temperature section shows 4 different sections, with 4 different grids. The boxes will slowly fill in with either red or blue, indicating you have to click on it until said color is gone. There's 10 characters included in the demo with some new faces as well as some returning characters. You have the new Good Times, Jolly, Tweety, George, and Maxie, as well as their decayed counterparts, and you also have Tal, who is, I think, the Antoinette. I don't know. Don't fact check me on that. As for their mechanics, Jolly approaches the front doors and all you have to do is shut them out. Tweety works like she did in the first game, coming at you from the elevator. Once she gets in, you have to go over to the elevator in your office and send it back down to floor 1. If you can't, all hope isn't lost, as you can hide from her under your desk, but she'll still leave you at extreme risk of dying to someone else. George and Maxie work similarly, coming at you from the vents. Where was I? If you catch either of them in the vents, you have to click override and change their path. If they do get to you, they'll deplete your oxygen and show up at one of your doors. Maxie requires you to flash her several times, George only requires you to hold a light on him. Now, Tal is real confusing. If he comes from the first floor through the vents, don't shine your light on him. If he comes from the elevator, don't call it back to floor 1. If he comes from floor 2, he'll show up at one of your front doors, in which case do not shut him out. Once he gets in, you have to hide under your desk. He'll start breathing really loud, which indicates the side of the desk he'll try to grab you from, and by extension you need to hide on. Decay, George, and Maxie function the exact same, approaching from either of your side doors. Once they get there, don't flash them, you just have to hide under your desk. Decay Tweety comes to your front doors, in which case you should not move a muscle. Decay Jolly works the same as his counterpart, only that he will jam the doors instead of killing you. The Antoinette will appear in your cameras, and if you see her, you have to exit the cameras or she'll temporarily shut them down. There really isn't much outside of that. Like I said, the game is just a demo and is unlikely to return anytime soon, so that's the end of that. Despite its flaws, Jolly has been one of my favorite fan game series for years now. It's a charming series, it's really well made, and if you haven't yet, I would definitely recommend checking it out. The link to the game Joel page will be in the description.